there have been a lot of times throughout the course of history where, there was a lot of bravery, a lot of bold decisions that had to have been made to help us advance and get where we are. And then there were some real dum-dums who, for whatever reason, just decided to be real silly gooses. And they live forever, and we get to laugh at them. It's Our Weird World.
Our Weird World.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week, looking at some incredible feats of human stupidity. All right, this is going to be a fun episode. All right, because, look, I'm not going to lie to you. There's still going to be death in this episode. I think for whatever reason, most of the stories end in someone dying. All right. But, unlike the serial killer episodes where like a bunch of innocent people were murdered and all of that, this usually is just going to be the main character dying, and well-deserved for it, if I must say. But this is going to be a fun episode. It's going to be a little bit different, just because the subject matter is a little bit more lighthearted, because, I don't know, we just as a culture enjoy laughing at the stupid decisions that other people make. So I have 4 stories for you today. We're looking at the stories of Franz Reichelt, Maurice Wilson, Gary Hoy, and Bob Knodel. And let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to start with the story of Franz Reichelt, who was a well-intentioned tailor and inventor who lived in Paris in the early 1900s. And obviously, if you know anything about history, you know the early 1900s, the Wright brothers had just kind of, I guess, not really perfected, but they had invented an airplane that actually worked pretty well. And with that invention, Franz saw an immediate problem. All right. What happens if the pilot of this new flying craft needed to get out in midair for some reason? He or she, but probably he, if we're being honest, because men, but shouldn't the pilot have a safe way to land back on safe ground? So with that problem in mind, Franz set out to create a parachute suit for pilots to wear. This suit was going to be made in the same way that other aviation suits already existed, just to kind of insulate you and protect you from the winds and whatever else. But Franz's suit would then have extra rods with an attaching silk canopy that then deployed whenever you released it. So he tested the first version of his suit on some dummies that he dropped from a 5th story window because, look, it's still early on in the invention of flight. Planes are not getting that high off the ground. 5 stories up is pretty reasonable. But here's the thing. Just as he had hoped, the suit deployed and the dummies, fell just enough, or it slowed the fall just enough for the dummies to land relatively gently on the ground. So Franz feels pretty good about this. He took his prototype to La Ligue Aérienne, I think that's how you pronounce it, which was the leading aeronautic organization in France at the time, in hopes that they would allow him to conduct a formal test and approve his prototype for mass production. La Ligue immediately rejected this design. All right. They said that the canopy was way too weak to support a full-size human from high altitude fall, because, look, humans, notably much bigger and heavier than a dummy, like a mannequin or something. They then spent they rejected this pretty quickly, and they spent the rest of Franz's presentation telling him to just quit while he was ahead. It's like, cool, dude, you've got a great idea, needs a lot of work, and you should not be the person who continues work on this. All right, you do not have it. Please stop now. We'll take it from here, or we'll find someone smarter. And, thanks, but no thanks. But Franz, to his credit, he didn't quit. He went on and conducted more tests with dummies from the courtyard of his home. But for some reason, all of his newer designs all failed, and failed worse than his original prototype. Well, in 1911, this is still an issue. So Colonel Lalance offered a 10,000 franc prize for the invention of a safe working parachute for pilots. This competition was to last for 3 years, and for the inventor to produce a working parachute that weighed no more than 55 pounds. Look, I've never been skydiving. I don't know how much a parachute fully packed in weighs. I would be shocked if it was that heavy, because that seems like a lot. It does. But upon hearing this news, Franz was like, heck yeah, man, I'm back in. I'm going to win this competition. And so he worked tirelessly to perfect his design. But no matter what he tried, no matter what design or configuration he tried, none of his tests ended up being successful. And then Franz had an epiphany. All right. Maybe it wasn't his design or his parachutes that were the problem, but rather it was the dummies that he continued to use. So later that year, because I guess no one else would do this, Franz tested the parachute himself when he jumped 30 feet from a building in the French town of, it's spelled Joinville. It's probably not pronounced that way. It's probably Joinville or some dumb French pronunciation like that. Anyway, obviously that parachute failed, but he landed in a pile of hay, so he was otherwise totally unharmed. He made another attempt in the town of Nogent from 25 feet up, but that also failed. So like he's jumping from lower heights and it's still not working. And this time from the 25-foot fall, he actually ended up breaking his leg. COVID has I think COVID has messed up my voice, because I have this thing. Like, I'm at a deeper register, which is cool. Love the deeper voice. Much more conducive for audio consumption. But there's this weird, permaflim that's just right there that makes it sound like I have something in my throat, but I don't really. So I don't know, man. COVID. It's fun. All right. Franz heals from his broken leg. And then he begins, for some reason, I don't know why he thought this was a great idea. He has 2 documented failed attempts from 30 and 25 feet. And so then this guy figures, well, I just got to jump higher, because that's how it works. And so he started begging authorities to let him test his parachute from the Eiffel Tower, notably much taller than 30 feet. I don't have the actual height in front of me right now, but way taller than 30 feet. And crazily enough, Franz actually received permission in 1912. All right. It didn't matter that he had actually already conducted 2 failed tests with dummies from the Eiffel Tower. Franz believed he was going to get it right if he just jumped off himself. I think it's pretty obvious, based on the setup of this episode, what's going to happen next. All right. On February 4th, 1912, Franz and 2 of his friends arrived at the Eiffel Tower. Curious onlookers watched as Franz modeled his suit for everyone. He explained how it was going to work. And then as his friends listened to him explain how the suit was supposed to work, they realized, dude, this is not going to work. This is not going to work at all. And so his friends pleaded with him not to jump, because it was so obvious to everyone what was about to happen. But Franz, totally defiant, all right? So after using common sense, they tried to appeal to his logic, and that did not work. So then his friends pointed out that the wind was too blustery up at the top of the tower, so he should probably just postpone the jump for another day. Franz was like, nah, dude, Doing it today. This is when it's going to happen. So at 8:22 a.m., Franz climbed on top of a stool that he had placed on top of a table on the tower's first deck, which I don't understand why he did that. Just either jump from the first deck or just go up to the second deck. Don't put a chair on top of a table, which creates a very unstable platform. But again, why am I trying to appeal to this person who, shockingly, he's going to die, all right? So, to check the wind, because he could tell that there was wind, Franz tossed a piece of paper over the railing, but convinced that everything was fine, Franz placed one foot on the guardrail, paused for roughly 40 seconds, just looking out over the Parisian skyline, hopefully contemplating just how stupid he was. And then he jumped. And almost immediately, his parachute opened up and just kind of expanded around him. And a few seconds later, he was reunited with the earth. And his test had been successful. He was totally fine. No, of course not. Like, you didn't really believe that, did you? Like, no. His parachute opened and then immediately closed back up around him, and he smacked the earth as hard as a human possibly could. And he immediately died as soon as he hit the ground. Yeah, I hope you didn't think that, like, he had actually made it, because he didn't. He died. He jumped off the Eiffel Tower and killed himself. All right? That's the end of that story. Next, we'll go to the story of Maurice Wilson, who was born on April 21st, 1898 in Bradford, England. And although he was destined to forever be a mill worker, just like his father and his brothers, World War I changed all of that, right? And Wilson, he was put into the army, and he quickly rose through the ranks and even ended up winning a military cross for being the only survivor in his unit, single-handedly holding a machine gun post against a surge of angry Germans. And that's actually true. His entire unit got wiped out. He was the only survivor, and he held off a German patrol, which is crazy. And then several months later in another battle, he was shot in his left arm and just never was able to fully recover from that. Well, in the years following World War I, Wilson just kind of wandered around England. He went over to the United States. He even went over to New Zealand, and he just kind of worked a bunch of different jobs and just tried to find purpose in his life. And although he was generally successful at whatever he did, I mean, he was a really talented guy, he just never felt truly fulfilled. But in 1932, after spending the last few years just physically and mentally ill because of PTSD and just, you know, his war injuries and all that, Wilson actually underwent a secret treatment. This is how it's presented, where he spent 35 days praying and fasting. And at the end of the 35 days, he was allegedly completely cured. Like, mentally, probably his left arm was still a little crippled, but otherwise he felt like back to normal and better than ever. And so as he kind of recovered from his little secret treatment in Germany's Black Forest, he finally realized his calling. He needed to climb Mount Everest, right? And so he started studying these newspaper articles that detailed George Mallory, and Andrew Irvin's expeditions to Everest, and realized that he could do it way better than they ever could. Like, he's pointing out all these things. It's like, you guys, we shouldn't have done that. I would do it way better. Because in his mind, all he had to do was just fly a plane to the top of the mountain, crash into the side of it, and then just walk a few feet to the top. That was his plan. Like, never mind that he had to fly solo halfway across the world to get there, which was practically unheard of at this point in the 1930s. And never mind that no one had ever tried or even considered a solo climb of Mount Everest. All right. This guy was going to crash a plane into the side of a mountain and survive that plane crash, and then just like take a quick jog up to the top. and be like, hey guys, I did. I don't know how he planned on getting down, but he felt like this was a solid plan. So the first hurdle was that he actually had to learn how to fly a plane and then also learn how to climb mountains. And so using the money that he had earned working various jobs since the war, Wilson actually had enough money to buy himself a Gypsy Moth biplane and also found an instructor to teach him how to use it. The instructor was not impressed and told Wilson that he would never make it to India on his own. Apparently Wilson was just really bad at flying, and he actually ended up taking twice as long as the average student to complete the pilot course. But Wilson eventually did earn his pilot's license, and he set out to prove this instructor wrong. Now, when it came to mountaineering and climbing mountains, Wilson just kind of figured that he needed to get his conditioning up. So he spent 5 weeks hiking several trails in England and Wales, which are notably way less rugged and at a lot lower altitude than Mount Everest. But look, he didn't consider this, guys. He also didn't consider that he would need to learn how to use an ice axe or crampons or how to climb on snow. He's just like, you know what? Mountains are mountains. They're all the same. I got this. All right. So with his training complete, at least in his mind, he set off for India. Which was crazy because in 1933, he ended up crashing his plane on a training run. And once that happened, people kind of started to realize what he was trying to do. And so he started receiving press attention for this crazy plan. At that point, the British Air Ministry found out, and they told him that he was not allowed. They were not going to let him fly to India. But Wilson, he didn't care because it's not like the British Air Ministry could tell him what to do once he left British airspace, which he's got a point. So on May 21st, 1933, he flies off. And he flew from England to Cairo, Egypt, where he landed and talked with government officials to see if he could get permission to fly over Persia, but his request was denied. So instead, he flew down to Bahrain to refuel. And what's crazy is he actually used a map from a children's book to get him there, which is insane. Although he was initially refused permission to land in Bahrain, it was eventually granted to him after he promised to fly back to England. So, which obviously he's not going to do that. And once he refueled, he just took off and flew to India because, like, who's going to stop him? Who's just going to be like, hey, the only way you land here is if you turn around and go back. Yeah, okay, sure, I can do that. And then just he takes off and flies in the opposite direction. Or you can even fly in the direction of England, and then once you're out of sight, just hook to the right and keep going to India. But whatever. So using notes that he had written down on the back of his hand, based on a map that he had seen in a Bahrain police station, that is how he navigated his way to India, which is honestly, this whole thing is insane, but that is actually really impressive. And although he did not have enough fuel to make it from Bahrain to India, he actually got really lucky and used the strong winds in the jet stream to just kind of push him the rest of the way to India, which is extremely irresponsible behavior, but whatever. He actually landed in Gwadar, completely empty, just kind of coasted it and glided it down in there, which Gwadar is a city in India, I do believe. And so after a quick refuel, he took off again and then landed in Lalbalu on the other side of India, where authorities had gotten word of this, and they immediately impounded his plane and was like, dude, you are not going to fly anymore over Nepal. You're done. So even though his master plan of crashing a plane into the side of Mount Everest was now completely out of the question, Wilson, he's not giving up. So he tried to get permission to enter Tibet on foot, but obviously they denied him there because, look, you just can't do things like this by yourself. So he spent the winter in Darjeeling planning his next move. He soon met 3 Sherpas who had worked on an Everest expedition earlier that year, and they all agreed to accompany him to the top of Everest. So on March 21st, 1934, Wilson and the three Sherpas, who all disguised themselves as Buddhist monks and also pretended to be deaf and dumb, like it just keeps getting more ridiculous. They arrived. They set out on foot into Tibet, and they arrived at a monastery 3 weeks later, and took some old equipment that had been left behind by a previous expedition. At that point, Wilson decided to leave the Sherpas behind, even though they were like, dude, you should really rely on us. We have done this before. We know how to get there. You should not go alone. And Wilson was like, nah, man, I got this. And so he set off for Everest on his own. 9 days later, he returned to the monastery completely snowblind and with a sprained ankle. Like, he had greatly underestimated everything. He had greatly underestimated how difficult this was going to be. But he thought that the only reason it was like this was because the weather was poor, and that his overall lack of preparation had nothing to do with this. So after spending 18 days recovering, Wilson set back out again. This time he brought 2 of the Sherpas along. And with the extra help, Wilson actually made it to a campsite higher up on the mountain. So he's making progress. But poor weather confined the group to camp for several days. And Wilson, he got impatient. And so he sets out on his own again. He somehow made it to 22,700 feet. He gets pretty close to the top. But then he encountered a 40-foot ice wall that he had no idea was going to be there. And he was forced to turn back again. At this point, back at the base camp, the Sherpas are pleading with him to return back to the monastery. Just give it up. It's not going to happen. But he refused. And instead, he set out on his own again. And within 1 week, he had reached the summit. He made it, and he became the first person to solo climb Mount Everest. Again, no, he did not. Please do, if you're believing me, really take a look at yourself and how gullible you are, because that's not what happened at all. His body, frozen, was found a year later buried in a crevasse near another base camp. Of course he didn't make it. All right. Anyway, next story here is of Gary Hoy, who was a lawyer for Holden Day Wilson LLP, which was this giant law firm in Toronto that employed over 200 attorneys. And along with litigating cases for clients and dealing with whatever other legal issues that Canadians have, Gary enjoyed testing various things around the office to ensure their structural integrity. It's a weird quirk to have, but hey, whatever. On July 9th, 1993, Gary looked at a large glass window pane from his office on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower, and he decided that's what he needed to test next. So obviously you guys can see where this is going. Gary, to his credit, he's a professional product tester, I guess. This wasn't the first time that he had tested the durability of an office window. All right. He had done this a lot. He was also a showman. He needed an audience to watch him conduct his experiments. So he gathered a group of interns together, and he told them to watch as he sprinted from one end of the hallway all the way down and then launched himself shoulder first into the window pane like a hockey player just checking somebody into the boards. And miraculously, the window didn't budge. All right. And I'm being serious. Everything was fine. The nervous interns gave him a polite applause, and then they started to go back to work. But Gary was not done. He was not convinced that he had hit the window as hard as he possibly could. So he gathered everyone back together. He's like, no, interns, no. You got to come back. Just give me one more. All right. And then you could go back to work. All right. So he makes a second attempt, starts at the other end of the hallway, sprints headlong into the window. And as soon as Gary's shoulder made impact, the entire pane separated from its bearings and sent Gary falling 24 stories down to the street below, where obviously he died. And honestly, this Stupidity actually ended up really hurting this law firm. Like, several lawyers working for the firm claimed emotional distress from the event. They left the company. And in 3 years, the firm actually ended up shutting down. And because of Gary being a dum-dum, this is considered the second biggest law firm failure in Canadian history. Like, insane. Stupid. All right. Our last story is of Bob Knodel, who was a pilot and an engineer. All right. And somehow, despite having extensive experience flying thousands of feet in the air, Bob was 100% convinced that the earth was flat. All right. Even more, he felt as though he needed to spend the rest of his life making people believe that the earth was flat. All right. Now, I can't figure out the flat earth people. I can't tell if they genuinely believe that the earth is just this flat disc and then everything else in the solar system is a sphere, or if they are just trolling, like they are the biggest trolls on the planet. I can't, they're really good. They're really good, you guys, at making you believe that they believe the earth is flat. All right. And it's not. All right. If you're out there, if you're listening right now and you're like, maybe, no, it's not. It's not flat. All right. It's not flat. All right. Just because you can't grasp, just because your brain is not smart enough to grasp the magnitude of how big Earth is, doesn't mean that what everyone, the majority, all of science, by the way, 100% of scientists in agreement that the Earth is a sphere, a 3D sphere. All right. Just because you can't grasp that doesn't mean that it's not real. All right. I don't know how planes work. All right. I don't understand how a giant metal tube that is hundreds of tons, if not thousands of tons, I don't understand how that can go fly in the air. How, like, the heaviest thing can just fly in the air. I don't understand how that works. No one will ever be able to explain that to me. All right. But I know that it's real. All right. I know that when I get on a plane, a miracle is happening. All right. I could just as easily, if I was an idiot, I could just as easily believe that once I get on the plane, I am just now in like some sort of holding cell. And that even if the windows are open, that's just a screen with a movie playing or whatever. And then even though I end up on the other side of the country, I'm choosing to believe that I'm just in a weird simulation and I have chosen to live in this fantasy world for a couple of days or something. Like, just real stupid logic. All right. But Bob, he's one of these people. All right. And so he started a YouTube channel in 2015 devoted to debunking the long-held notion that the earth was round and spinning through space. And he became closely involved with the flat earth movement, and he also helped other flat earthers develop more technical aspects of their actual model. This model, which is a very real thing, you can go look it up. It depicts the earth as a disc covered by a large dome where the sun and the moon just kind of move around it. Antarctica, as we understand it, is not a relatively circular continent on the bottom of the sphere, but rather Antarctica is just this giant ice wall that surrounds the outer edge of the disk. And in 2017, Bob finally put his engineering intellect to decent use when he began calculating what it would actually take to prove that the earth was not flat. Like, here's the thing. He's doing it very backwards. He is starting from the point that the earth is flat and that he is trying to prove that it's actually a sphere. All right. When in reality, he should have been conducting experiments to prove that the earth is in fact flat, but whatever, like it is what it is. He concluded that if the earth made one full rotation every 24 hours, then it would also have to turn 15 degrees every hour. I think the math works out on that. I don't know. I'm not a good numbers guy. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Science is hard, you guys. Bob, however, wanted to prove that science, quote unquote science, was nothing but a giant government lie. And he set out to disprove the theory that he had just created to prove that the earth was in fact round. So to do that, he needed a high-end gyroscope, which conveniently cost about $20,000. That amount, however, was somehow not a problem for Bob and his science partner, a guy named Jaron Campanella. They somehow were able to obtain the gyroscope. They spent $20,000 to obtain this gyroscope and then set out to expose the government and all of its lies. And Bob was so confident. This is what's funny to me. Bob was so confident that he was about to blow the government's lies wide open that he brought in a camera crew to film the experiment. And you can see this experiment happen. It's on the documentary called Behind the Curve. I saw it on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but maybe you can still find it. Highly recommended. It's a hoot and a half. All right. Guess what, you guys? The gyroscope showed a 15-degree drift. Like, Bob has literally proved himself that the earth is round. All right. All of his calculations have come back correct. And Bob, disappointed that he has been proven wrong, he refused to accept that this is the truth. All right. He just makes up every possible excuse that, oh, well, that doesn't mean anything, I don't know. But so here we go. He then set out to perform another experiment to disprove the experiment that then also disproved his theory. So what he did in this second experiment is Bob and his team got a laser, or they wanted at least to obtain a laser and shine it over a distance of about 3 miles with two holes, or with two like pieces of wood, wooden walls with two holes cut through them. All right. At the same point. All right. And basically the reason of that is if the earth was flat, the laser would shine straight through the center of both holes, like at the same exact point. However, if the earth was curved, then the lasers would actually end up hitting the wood, the outer portion of the wall, instead of shining straight through the hole. All right. Because obviously if it's on a curve, the laser would just keep going up versus, where it would go back down. Anyway, well, unfortunately, they failed to obtain a laser, probably because they had spent so much money on the gyroscope. So they opted instead for a very focused, bright light. All right. Guess what happened, you guys? The light did not make it through both holes, proving again that the earth was not flat. And you can watch this on the documentary. It is so satisfying to watch these people mentally crumble because they think they're about to prove it, and then they are proving themselves wrong. They are literally proving themselves wrong in front of God in the universe. And despite proving themselves wrong twice, using highly advanced scientific methods, Bob and the rest of his team, they still don't believe it. They still continue to believe that the earth is flat because science is just a thing that the government made up. It's a series of methodologies that the government made up that is part of their elaborate lie, because the earth being flat is just so important. I don't know. I don't get these people, but that is the end of our stories today. Yeah, I forgot just how frustrating that flat earth story is. I mean, the other three, hilarious. Flat earthers, man. I just that's why I don't understand. To me, the way my brain works is you have to be trolling people. It's either that or you are willfully and aggressively choosing to be ignorant and stupid. Because for you to do such an elaborate scientific experiment and then be proven wrong, but then still choosing to believe what you believed before, you're either trolling us or you are really that dumb. And I don't know. It's just, God. Anyway, let's see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, you cannot fly and crash a plane into Earth. Honestly, I don't know. Can you? I don't think anyone else has tried, but I mean, maybe you can. Maybe has anyone really tried? Like take like a helicopter or something and fly it to the top of Mount Everest. Is that possible? Maybe. Maybe Maurice Wilson wasn't as crazy as he thought. Has anyone looked into this and tried it? I feel like that would be cheating because I think the whole allure of climbing Mount Everest is to actually literally climb it and climb the tallest thing on Earth. But I don't know. Why hasn't Richard Branson or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos just taken a helicopter up to Everest and then just gotten out and been like, hey, I did it. And then gotten back in and flown back to wherever. I don't know. Maybe. Number two, look, don't try. There's safety standards and there are secure ways of going about doing things, but do not try to test windows in a high rise. All right. I'm not going to go down to Uptown Charlotte right now and go to the top of the Duke Energy building and test all of the windows and then fall to my death. All right. That's just a dumb thing to do. Leave that to, I don't know, architects and engineers, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. Number three, the earth is not flat. It's not. If you believe the earth is flat, stop listening to this show. I don't want your kind. All right. Like, I know the PC thing to do is to be inclusive and to not discriminate. But if you truly believe that the earth is flat, get out of here. All right. Just go away. I don't want you around me and the stuff that I do. All right. You go be weird somewhere else. Next week on Our Weird World, we're going to talk about some kids. All right. Some mysterious kids. All right. Kids creep me out. I think they're weird. Just not my wife loves kids. All right. So that's a bridge we're going to have to cross at some point. But next week, I'm going to talk about some stories involving just weird stories that involve kids. So we're going to look at the Green Children of Woolpit, the story of Casper Hauser, and the boy in the box. So weird stories next week. So hope you come back and check those out. All right. Thank you all for listening. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.